I will read now for you in ASMR style, Captain Underpants. It is a third epic novel. ASMR Katz. Hello my little mouses, and welcome back to a new episode on my ASMR YouTube channel. And I will read for you now the third epic novel from Captain Underpants. So put the headphones in your ear because this is a high quality recording and I want you to enjoy the satisfaction of sound. If you not already did, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the notification bell and follow me everywhere because the World Wide Web is my playground and I have a lot more to offer. I am always happy about every support, so feel free to write a comment and to tell me a bit more about you and what you like on ASMR. Let me know if you already know this kind of book, comic book, and otherwise I just want you to lean back, relax, and enjoy this new episode of Captain Underpants, read from me in ASMR style. Captain Underpants and the invasion of the incredible naughty cafeteria ladies from outer space, and the subsequent assault of the equally evil lounge-room zombie nerds. The third epic novel by Dav Pilkey. Hello, it is us again. Before you read this book, there's something you should know. So Harold and I have created this informative pamphlet to fill you in on the details. Please don't let this comic fall into the wrong hands. George Beard and Harold Hutzing presents a Deny Everything production. Episode 1. The Phantom Principal. A long time ago, in an elementary school far away, there were two cool kids named George and Harold. They had an evil principal named Mr. Krupp, who was strong in the ways of the Force. He forced them to study, he forced them to clean, and he forced them to behave. So George and Harold hypnotized him. You will obey on every command, okay? You are now Captain Underpants. It started out as a joke, but it wasn't funny for long. Mr. Krupp thought he really was the world's greatest superhero. He got into all kinds of trouble. George and Harold had to save him and the entire planet twice. Now, the only way can turn Captain Underpants back into Mr. Krupp is to pour water over his head. But the worst part is that George and Harold have to keep an eye on Mr. Krupp, because for some strange reason, whenever he hears somebody snap their fingers, he turns back into you know who. So whatever you do, please don't snap your fingers around Mr. Krupp. You hurt the man. Please, please, please don't snap those fingers. This has been a public service announcement from George and Harold, who still deny everything. Chapter 1. George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. If you were looking for a few words to describe George and Harold, you might come up with kind, funny, smart, determined, and deep. Just ask their principal, Mr. Krupp. He'd tell you that George and Harold are kind of funny-looking, smart Alex who are determined to drive everybody off the deep end. But don't listen to him. George and Harold are actually very clever and good-hearted boys. Their only problem is that they are 4th graders, and at George and Harold's school, 4th graders are accepted to still and pay attention for 7 hours a day. George and Harold are just not very good at it. The only thing George and Harold are good at is being silly. Unfortunately, George and Harold's silliness gets them into trouble every now and then. Sometimes it gets them into a lot of trouble. And one time it got them into so much trouble it almost caused the entire earth to be destroyed by an army of giant evil zombie nerds. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2. The Evil Space Guys. One dark clear night in Ohio, a flaming object was seen striking across the quiet midnight sky. It shone brightly for a second or two, then fizzled out just above Jeremy Howard's elementary school. Nobody gave it a second thought. The next day, everything seemed pretty normal, but noticed anything different about the school. Nobody paid any attention to the roof. And, of course, nobody looked up and said, "Hey, what's that big spaceship thing doing on the roof of the school?" Perhaps if they had the horrible ordeal that followed might never have happened, and you wouldn't be sitting here reading about it right now. But they didn't. It did. And well, here we are. As we can all plainly see, there was a spaceship on the top of the building, and inside that spaceship were 3 of the most evil, hideous, and merciless spacemen ever to set foot on the roof of a small Midwestern elementary school. Their names were Zorks, Clucks, and Jennifer. Their mission? To take over planet Earth. "First," said Zorks, "we must find a way to infiltrate the school. Then," said Clucks, "we will turn all the children into giant superpowered evil zombie nerds. Finally," said Jennifer, "we will use them to take over the world." Zor and Clucks laughed. "Silence, you fools," barked Jennifer. "If our plan is to work, we must wait until it's nearly convenient. In the meantime, we will watch their every move on the trianguloscopy." Chapter 3. Fun with Science. Early that morning, George and Harold were sitting in their science class making silly noises. Meow, George mewed softly without moving his lips. Growled Harold without opening his mouth. There it is again, exclaimed their science teacher, Mr. Feely. I distinctly heard a cat and a dog in here. We didn't hear anything, the children said, trying not to laugh. I must be hearing things again, Mr. Fyde worried. Maybe you should leave and go and see a doctor, said George with concern. I can, said Mr. Fyde. Today is the day of the big balcony experiment. The children all groaned. Mr. Fyde's science experiments were usually the most idiotic things on earth. They almost never worked and were always boring. But today's experiment was different. Mr. Fyde brought a large fake-looking volcano that he'd had made out of paper mache. He filled the volcano with a box of ordinary baking soda. Baking soda is called sodium bicarbonate, explained Mr. Fyde. Meow. Ooh, said Mr. Fyde. Did any one of you children just hear? Never mind. Mr. Fyde opened up a bottle of clear liquid. Now, watch what happens when I pour vinegar on the baking soda, he said. The children watched as the tiny volcano started to rumble. Soon, a large globe of foam goop spouted out of the top. The goop poured over the desk and dripped on the floor, creating a huge mess. Oops, said Mr. Fyde. I guess I used too much baking soda. George and Harold were stunned. How did you do that? Asked Harold. Well, said Mr. Fyde, the vinegar acts as a liberating agent which releases the gaseous carbonate radical element of the sodium bicarbo. Meow. Mr. Fyde paused. Oh, excuse me, Sharon. I've got to go and see a doctor. Mr. Fyde put on his coat and hurried through the door. George and Harold got up and studied the messy volcano experiment with great interest. You think what I'm thinking? Asked George. I think I'm thinking what you're thinking, said Harold. Chapter 4. The Setup. After school, the two boys raced to George's house and got down to business. George and Harold sat down and began creating a fake cupcake recipe. We just add a box of baking soda and a bottle of vinegar to this recipe, said George. And whoever makes these cupcakes will get a big surprise. Let's add 2 boxes of baking soda and 2 bottles of vinegar to the recipe, said Harold. That way they get an even bigger surprise. Good idea, laughed George. Chapter 5. Mr. Krupp's Crispy Cupcakes. The next morning at school, George and Harold strolled into the cafeteria and taped a festive-looking card to the kitchen door. Soon, the lunch ladies arrived. Oh, look, said Mrs. Crane, the head lounge today. Today is Mr. Krupp's birthday, and he'd like us to make a batch of cupcakes just for him. Isn't that cute? I've got an idea, said the cook, Mrs. DePoint. Why don't we surprise him and make cupcakes for the whole school? Good thinking, said Miss Creant. Let's see now, this recipe serves 10, and we have about 1,000 students and teachers in the school, so we need 100 eggs, 150 cups of flour, 200 boxes of baking soda, 7 quarters of green food coloring, 50 sticks of butter, 150 cups of sugar, and let's see. Oh yes, 200 bottles of vinegar. The lunch ladies scurried about gathering everything they needed. They dumped the eggs, food coloring, milk and baking soda into a large vat and began to mix thoroughly. Then somebody poured in the vinegar. Chapter 6. What happened next? Note: please shake this book back and forth uncontrollably when you read the following words. Also shout it out as loud as you can. Don't worry, you won't get in trouble. Bush. Here comes the goop. A giant wave of green goop crashed through the cafeteria doors and splashed down the halls, swallowing everything in its path. Book bags, bulletin boards, lunch boxes, coat racks, trophy cases. Nothing could stand in the way of the giant green globogok. It traveled down the north, east and west wings of the school, covering everything from the drinking fountains to the text on this page. It squeezed into lockers and squashed down the stairs. It wasn't long before the green goop began spilling into all the classrooms. "Ugh," said George. "Something tells me the lunch ladies made more than just one batch of Mr. Krabby Crispy Krupp cakes. But that was their idea, not ours," cried Harold. "Speaking of ideas," said George, "I've got one." "What?" asked Harold. "Run!" Chapter 7. The Wrath of the Cafeteria Ladies. The next afternoon, as cleaning crews sorted through the sticky green hallways and sticky green classrooms, the cafeteria ladies had a meeting with Mr. Krupp in his sticky green office. "But it wasn't even my birthday," cried Mr. Krupp. "We know you had nothing to do with this," said Mrs. Creant. "We think it was those two awful boys, George and Harold." "Well," said Mr. Krupp, rolling his eyes, "of course it was George and Harold, but do you have any proof?" "Proof?" said the lunch ladies. "Why, George and Harold are always playing tricks on us. Every day they change the letters around on our lunch sign. They put pepper in the napkin dispensers and unscrew the caps on the salt shakers. They start food fights. They go sledging on our lunch trays. They make everybody laugh so the milk squirts out of their noses. And they're constantly creating those awful comics books about us." Chapter 8. Captain Underpants and the Night of the Living Lunch Ladies. Late on Friday afternoon, the lunch ladies were cleaning up the cafeteria. There's a lot of half-eaten foods in the trash barrel, well poured in and well served again next week. Waste not, want not. But while they are working, the janitor accidentally locked the school for the weekend. The lunch ladies were trapped inside. Help! They were forced to eat their own food to survive. Past the lips and over the gums. Look out, Tommy, here it comes. When Jennifer returned on Monday morning, the lunch ladies were dead, victims of their own cooking. Oopsie daisy. The janitor took the dead lunch ladies up the hill to bury them. That looks like a good place. But it wasn't. Warning, this hill is haunted. Whatever you do, don't bury dead stuff here. Help! The lunch ladies aroused from the dead. They are hungry for brains and they just attacked the gym teacher. But I thought you said they were hungry for brains. This looks like a job for Captain Underpants. What seems to be the problem? Living dead lunch ladies. Don't worry, I give them veggies. Oh no, veggie power doesn't work on the living deads. They got into a big fight. Captain Underpants was faster than a speeding waistband, more powerful than boxer shorts, and able to leap tall buildings without getting a veggie. But the lunch ladies were strong too. They ran faster than their runny meatloaf gravy. They were more powerful than the stench of their sloppy joy. And they could leap tall buildings with the gassy after effects of the Texas-style twin bean chili con carne. Soon, they were all on the top of a tall building. We've got you now, waistband warrior. Not so fast. Captain Underpants pressed a button on his utterly waistband. And out poop a roll toilet paper. Even the living dead can't escape the toilet paper of justice. Captain Underpants blessed the celestial lunch ladies, but they had a trick up their sleeves. They poured the steam sauce on the toilet paper of justice. We are free. Let's get him, girls. Wah! Captain Underpants tossed the toilet paper of justice. Oop! It went, and they swung safety. The lunch ladies weren't so lucky. Hooray for Captain Underpants. Chapter 9. Quitting Time. We're fed up with those two boys, cried Miss Cryant. They're always making fun of our cooking. Yeah, said Mr. DePoint. Our food isn't that bad. I ate here once and hardly got sick at all. Well, I can punish them if we don't have any proof, said Mr. Krupp. Fine, said the lunch ladies. Then we quit. Ladies, cried Mr. Krupp. Be responsible. You can't just quit on such short notice. But the lunch ladies didn't care. They marched right off Mr. Krupp's sticky green office, and that was the end of that. Rats, cried Mr. Krupp. Now, where I am going to find 3 new lunch ladies by tomorrow morning. Suddenly, there was a knock on Mr. Krupp's door. 3 very large women wearing lots of makeup walked into the office. Hello, said the first woman. My name is Xoxette. These are my sister Klaxette and Jenniferette. We've come to apply for jobs as cafeteria ladies. Wow, said Mr. Krupp. Do you have an experience? No, said Klaxette. Do you have any credentials? Asked Mr. Krupp. No, said Xoxette. Do you have any references? Asked Mr. Krupp. No, said Jenniferette. You're hired, said Mr. Krupp. Wonderful, said Jenniferette. Now our plan to take over the world is, our plan to feed the children healthy is underway. The 3 new lunch ladies laughed horrible. Then they left Mr. Krupp's office and got started preparing the next day's lunch menu. Well, that was easy, said Mr. Krupp. Now to take care of George and Harold. Chapter 10. Busted. George and Harold were in study hall when they heard the dreaded announcement over the intercom. George Beard and Harold Hutchins, please report to Mr. Krupp's office immediately. Oh no, cried Harold, we are busted. No way, said George. Remember what happened yesterday was not our fault. We didn't do it. It was an accident. But Mr. Krupp was not understanding. I can't prove it, but I know you boys are responsible for yesterday's disaster. I'm going to punish you by taking away your cafeteria privilege for the rest of the year. No more cafeteria food for you two. No more cafeteria food, whispered Harold. I thought he said he was going to punish us. Yeah, Josh smiled. Maybe if we're really bad, he'll take away our homework privileges too. I heard that, screamed Mr. Krupp. From now on, you boys are going to have to pack your own lunches and eat them in my office so I can keep an eye on you. Rats, said Harold. But we didn't do it, George protested. We didn't do it. Too bad, said Mr. Krupp. Boys, said George, this is probably the first time we got in trouble for something we didn't do. Unless you count all those times we didn't do our homework, said Harold. Oh yeah, laughed George. Chapter 11. Brown begging it. The next day, George and Harold each brought their own sandwiches to Mr. Krupp's office for lunch. I will trade you half of my peanut butter and gummy worms sandwich, said George, for half of your tuna salad with chocolate chips and miniature marshmallow sandwich. Sure, said Harold. You want some barbecue sauce on that? Phew, your kids are disgusting, Mr. Krupp shouted. Soon, George and Harold were munching on potato chips with whipped cream and chocolate sprinkles. Mr. Krupp was turning green. What's that for dessert? Asked Harold. Hard-boiled eggs dipped in a hot fudge and Skittles, said George. Ugh, screamed Mr. Krupp. I can't stand it anymore. He got up and stumbled through the door for some fresh air. You know, said George, now that Mr. Krupp is gone, we could run to the cafeteria and change the letters around on the lunch sign. Cool, said Harold. So George and Harold sneaked to the cafeteria, but when they read the lunch sign, they were a bit confused. What's going on here, said George. It looks like somebody already changed the sign. Forget the sign, said George. Look at everybody. They've changed. It was true. All the kids and the teachers in school were entering the cafeteria looking as normal as ever, but they were leaving the cafeteria looking quite different. Look, cried George. They are all wearing broken eyeglasses held together with masking tape, and they all got vinyl pocket protectors. They were turned into nerds. And look at their skin, said George. They are all grey and clammy. This can only mean one thing. They're zombie nerds, asked Harold. I'm afraid so, said George. Let's just hope they were friendly, said Harold. Whoever heard of friendly zombie nerds? Asked George. I'm afraid, said Harold whined. There's no time to be afraid, said George. We got to get to the bottom of this. That's what I'm afraid of, said Harold. Chapter 12. The bottom of this. George and Harold crawled into the cafeteria and sneaked through the kitchen doors. There, they hid behind a table while the incredible naughty cafeteria ladies from outer space discussed their plans to take over the world. Look at those pony earthlings, law socks. They are all drinking evil zombie nerd milkshake and transforming before our very eyes. "It won't be long now," said Clarks. "Tomorrow we will feed them super evil rapid growth juice. Then they will grow to the size of super trees." "Exactly," snurred Jennifer. "Then we will unleash our giant evil zombie nerds upon the earth, and soon the planet will be ours." The three evil space guys threw back their heads and laughed hysterically. "We got to tell Mr. Krupp about this," Harold whispered. "Right," whispered George. "But first, we've got to get rid of the super evil rapid growth juice." George carefully reached up and swiped the cartoon of juice. "What should we do with it?" asked Harold. "Let's pour it out of the window," said George. "That way it won't do anything damage." "Good idea," said Harold. While the naughty cafeteria ladies continued laughing, George kindly emptied the cartoon of super evil rapid growth juice out of the window. "You know," whispered Harold, "Mrs. Krupp is never going to believe that sinister cafeteria ladies from outer space have turned everybody into evil zombie nerds." "Sure, he believes us. He's got to believe us," said George. "I hope he believes us." Chapter 13. He doesn't believe them. "That's the most ridiculous story I've ever heard," laughed Mr. Krupp. "But it's true," cried Harold. "Yeah," said George. "Everybody in the entire school is an evil zombie nerd. The kids, the teachers, everybody." "All right," said Mr. Krupp. "I'll prove it to you." He pressed a button on his intercom and called for his secretary. Soon, Mr. Trough entered the room. She was dressed in a pink polka dot polyester dress with orthopedic knee-high stockings and ugly brown arch-supported loafers. "See," said Harold, "she's dressed like a nerd." "She always acted like that," snapped Mr. Krupp. "But she's grey and clammy and reeks of freaky zombie feed death," cried George. "She always smells like that," Mr. Krupp argued, "and she always grey and clammy too." George and Harold had to admit that school secretary were not very good subject to compare and contrast with evil zombie nerds. But then Miss Antrophy leaned over and took a huge bite off Mr. Krupp's desk. "Must destroy Earth," she moaned as she took another bite. Even Mr. Krupp had to agree that Miss Antrophy was acting a bit more evil than usual. So, George and Harold took Mr. Krupp down to the cafeteria to confront the evil lunch ladies. Suddenly, out of the shadows stepped the evil Zorks. "Gotcha!" Zorks cried as he grabbed into the Harold's shoulders. Screamed Harold. He squirmed away, pulling Zork's gloves off and revealing two slimy green tentacles. "See, Mr. Krupp," said George. "We told you. They were space guys." "You fool," screamed Zorks. "Now we will destroy you." The evil Zorks pointed this tentacle at George, Harold, and Mr. Krupp and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, Mr. Krupp began to change. A hurried grin spread across Mr. Krupp's face. He threw out his chest and placed his fists firmly at the side, looking quite triumphant. Oh, said George. "That evil space guy just snapped his fingers. Now Mr. Krupp is turning into you-know-who." "Hey, wait a second," said Harold. "Tentacles don't have fingers. You can snap a tentacle?" "There's no time to argue the physical improbability of the story," said George. "We've got to stop Mr. Krupp from changing into Captain Underpants before it's too late." Chapter 14. It's too late. Mr. Krupp turned and dashed out the door. His clothes flew off behind him as the hallways echoed with jubilant party about the superity of underwear. George and Harold dashed after him, but the doors was quietly blocked by Zorks, Clarks, and Jennifer. "You wanna go out of this kitchen?" the evil Jennifer mocked. "You gotta go through us." George grabbed the rolling pin. Harold grabbed the cast iron frying pan. "I sure hope we don't have to resort to incredible graphic violence," said Harold. "Me too," said George. Chapter 15. The Incredible Graphic Violence Chapter, Part 1. Warning. The following chapter contains terrible interpol scenes that currently do not belong in a children's book. If you are offended by such senseless, please put this book down immediately. Raise your arms over your head and run screaming to your nearest shoe shop. When you get there, ask them to make you a cheeseburger. Note: this probably won't help you a bit, but we think it will be funny. Flipporama. Lately, there have been many groundbreaking advances in the field of animation. There is claymation, dynamation, Japanese anime, and even computer animation. But if you ask us, nothing beats the Academy-sized thrills cheesy animation technology. The Flipporama. George pins a predator. Harold bonks a bad guy. George and Harold save the day for now. Chapter 16. The Assault of the Equally Evil Lounge Room Zombie Nerds. George and Harold had barely caught their breaths when Captain Underpants finally showed up. "Tra-la-la-la," he said. "I'm here to fight for truth, justice, and all that is press-shrunk and cottony." Where were you back in Chapter 15 when we needed you?" asked George. "It was at the shoe shop ordering a cheeseburger," said Captain Underpants. While our three heroes were talking, nobody noticed that Zorks, Clarks, and Jennifer had slithered away. The wounded space guys approached the lunchroom loudspeakers and called for the evil zombie nerds. "Zombie nerds," instructed Jennifer. "Destroy Captain Underpants and his little friends too." Soon, every evil zombie nerd in the entire school put down their Omni magazines and headed for the cafeteria. "Must destroy Underpants," they groaned. "Must destroy Underpants." Suddenly, our three heroes were surrounded by evil, vicious zombie nerds. Closer and closer they came. "Oh no," cried George. "What we do now?" "To the underwear cave," shouted Captain Underpants. "There's no underwear cave," said Harold. "Really?" said Captain Underpants. "Well, just let's climb up the ladder instead." George, Harold, and Captain Underpants scurried about the ladder, and soon they were all on the roof. "Well, we are safe now," said Harold. "Yep," said George. "That's for sure," said Captain Underpants. Chapter 17. Oh yeah? It didn't take long before George, Harold, and Captain Underpants looked behind them. "Hey," said Harold. "What's that big spaceship thingy doing on the roof of the school?" "And where did that super evil, rapidly growing dangerous came from?" "Captain Underpants." George and Harold gasped. They looked at each other with sudden panicked realization that only children who have accidentally created a giant mutated garden nuisance would know. Stumped George. We have no idea how that happened. Yeah, said Harold. Absolutely no idea at all. At the moment the door of the roof swung open, Zorks poked his evil head out of and shouted, "We got you now." With nowhere else to run, our three heroes quickly scurried about the ladder of the big sketching and closed the door behind them. Inside of the spaceship, George, Harold, and Captain Underpants discovered a refrigerator filled with strange juice. "Look," said George. "Here's cartoon of anti-evil zombie nerd juice. How convenient." "And look at this," said Harold. "A cartoon of ultra-nasty self-destruct juice. Now, this could come in handy." "And look what I found," said Captain Underpants. "A whole carton of extra-strength superpower juice." "Hey, give me that," said George, snapping the cartoon out of Captain Underpants' hand. Chapter 18. Space Slaves. Suddenly the door of the spaceship swung open, and the three evil space guys slithered inside. "Step away from the refrigerator," screamed Jennifer, "and get into the jail cell." George and Harold hid their juice cartons behind their backs, and our three heroes stepped quickly into the jail cell. Zorks started up the engines, and the spaceship lifted off. It rose 100 meters in the air and hovered over the school. "You three punny earthlings are very fortunate," said Jennifer. "You will get to the witness to destruction of your planet from the safety of your jail cell. Afterwards, you will have the honor of being our obedient space slaves." "Oh man," said George and Harold. "Quickly, Clark," said Jennifer. "Get me a cartoon of super evil repaired growth juice from the refrigerator. We can pour it into our spray gun and shower it open our evil zombie nerds." Chapter 19. The Big Switcheroo. Clark returned with a cartoon of super evil rapid growth juice and placed it on the control panel. "Soon," said Jennifer, "Earth will be ours." The three aliens threw back their heads and laughed and laughed. Suddenly, George got an idea. He whispered to Harold for a second or two. Then he quietly reached through the bars of the jail cell and swept Clark's cartoon of super evil rapid growth juice. George carefully peeled the label of the cartoon and stuck it over the label of his ultra-nasty self-destruction juice. While he was busy doing that, Harold reached through the bars and switched the label of the spray gun and the fuel tank. Finally, George reached back through the bars and put his cartoon of ultra-nasty self-destruction juice, which no one reads super evil rapid growth juice, on the control panel. "I don't get it," whispered Captain Underpants. "The fuel tank now says spray gun, and the spray gun now says fuel tank, and the rapid growth juice has been replaced with the self-destruct juice. What does that all mean?" "You find out," said Harold. When the three evil space guys had finished laughing triumphantly, Jennifer reached for the cartoon that reads super evil rapid growth juice and poured it into the northerly that reads spray gun. "Oh, I get it," said Captain Underpants. "That space guy didn't pour growth juice into the spray gun. He poured self-destruct juice into the fuel tank." "Yep," George said. "And that means this spaceship thingy is going to explode into a million pieces." "Right," said Harold. The spaceship began to sputter and shake as smoke billowed out of the control panels. Soon sparks were flying and ceiling tiles were falling. Captain Underpants smiled proudly because he had figured out George's plan. But his smile didn't last long. "Hey," he cried. "We're in the spaceship thingy. What's going to happen to us?" "We had to sacrifice ourselves to save the world," said George. "I'm afraid we are not going to make it." "Of course we make it," cried Captain Underpants. "We've got veggie power on our side." Chapter 20. The Great Escape. Captain Underpants grabbed a roll of toilet paper from the jail cell lavatory. "We can swing to safety on this," he said. "You can't swing on toilet paper," he said. "So I can," said Captain Underpants. "I did it in my last comic book." Captain Underpants opened the jail cell window and tossed the toilet paper into a tall tree below them. "Come on, fellas," he said. "Let's swing out of here before its spaceship explodes." "The toilet paper won't hold you," said George. "It's not strong enough." "Sure it is," said Captain Underpants. George and Harold grabbed Captain Underpants' cape. "Don't jump," they cried. But Captain Underpants wouldn't listen. He jumped through the window with George and Harold still clinging to his cape. "Ark!" they screamed as they fall on the ground and were killed instantly. Just kidding. Of course, the toilet paper could not support the weight of the three heroes, and for a moment it looked like they were doomed. But suddenly, Captain Underpants' red polyester cape opened up like a parachute. George, Harold, and the waistband warriors floated down safely as the spaceship above them exploded. Kaboom! "Hallelujah," cried Harold. "We are not gonna die. We are not gonna die." "Or," said George, "maybe we are." Chapter 21. The Deliciously Dangerous Death-Defying Den of Doom. George, Harold, and Captain Underpants floated downwards directly into the waiting jaws of Bending of Doom. "Oh man," cried Harold, "we could have got killed in a cool exploding spaceship, but instead we are going to get eaten by a dandelion. How humiliating." "Yeah," George moaned, "people are going to giggling at our funerals." The dandelion munched Captain Underpants and swung George and Harold around like a couple of rag dolls. The two boys flew off and landed on the roof of the school. "Help me," screamed Captain Underpants as the dangling of the doom swung him back on force. "What should we do?" cried Harold. "I got an idea," said George. "It's a bad idea, and I know we're going to regret it, but we've got to act facts. That fate of the entire planet is in our hands." The next time the giant evil dandelion lurched towards the boys, George poured some extra strength superpower juice into Captain Underpants' mouth. "What do you think is going to happen now?" asked Harold. "I don't know," said George, "but I have a feeling it's going to involve incredible graphic violence." Chapter 22. The Incredible Graphic Violence Chapter Part 2 in Flipporama. Warning: the following chapter contains scenes of very unpleasant nature. All nastiness was performed by a qualified stuntman and a licensed stunt plant. Do not attempt to battle giant evil dangles at home, even if you have recently consumed extra strength superpower juice. Such behavior could result in serious boo-boos. When dandelions attack. The Wedgie Weed Whacker. Hooray for Captain Underpants! Chapter 23. The 23rd chapter. Captain Underpants, with the help of his newly developed superpowers, had defeated the delirious, dangerous, death-defying Dandelion of Doom. Now, the only thing left to do was to stop the evil zombie nerds. "Oh, how are we going to conquer the evil zombie nerds?" asked George. "How we will ever change them back into normal?" "Well, we could try this anti-evil zombie nerd juice," said Harold. George rolled his eyes. "I was hoping for something a little more dramatic," he said, "but we're running out of pages. Let's do it." So, Harold mixed up a batch of anti-evil zombie nerd root beer and ordered everybody in school to drink some. The evil zombie nerds lined up. "Must drink root beer," they moaned. "Must drink root beer." When the last zombie nerd had swallowed his last sip of root beer, George ordered Captain Underpants to get dressed back up like Mr. Krupp. "But I lose my superpowers if I put on clothing," said Captain Underpants. "The power of underwear must be—" "Just put the clothes on," George instructed. Captain Underpants did as he was told, and then George poured water over the hero's head. "Now, all we can do is wait," said Harold. "Wait and hope that everybody returns to normal." Chapter 24. To make a long story short, they did. Chapter 25. Back to normal? "Hooray," said Harold. "It's great to have everybody back to normal." "Yep," said George, "that's for sure." But back to normal probably wasn't the best choice of words. For a while, the student and faculty were the same as they always been. Something had definitely changed about Mr. Krupp. Because from the day on, whenever he heard the sound of finger snapping, Mr. Krupp not only turned back into you-know-who, but he also had extra strange superpower. And if you thought it was hard for George and Harold to keep up with him before, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. "Oh no," screamed Harold. "Here we go again. Tra-la-la-la." This book was The Search of Captain Underpants. I have way more books waiting for you from this novel by Dav Pilkey. It is a bit hard to read for me because it's a cartoon, but I actually like the pictures inside and I get more and more comfortable with this kind of novel. It is something new for me, and I would be amazed if you let me know in the comments if you like this kind of novel as well, or if you already heard from it or read it. I actually have to say that I think it is kind of nice to create a book, like a comic, but also with some amazing illustration and some funny moments inside. It is kind of nice, and I hope you enjoy it too. I'm not only reading novels here on my ASMR channel, I also have a lot more in my playlists. I do as well food ASMR in mukbang style. I have some philosophical books waiting for you, some childhood classic books, but I also go with you on the adventure of sound. And it's kind of amazing because ASMR is so simple but have such a big effect. You can lean back, enjoy, take rest, can fall asleep actually, or even just let go from your thoughts and enjoy the moment of being. For me, ASMR is an amazing adventure and I am happy to have you on my side. I'm not only doing ASMR clips, I also do a lot of other things here in the World Wide Web. So if you are curious, just find it out yourself what I have to offer. Because here is my playground and I have a lot more pages who fulfill your needs. If you not already did, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, to click on the notification bell, and to support me with every comment and all what you have to offer, because I would be honored to let my whole projects grow and to show you my little world. I hope I see you to the next episode of Captain Underpants and to read for you an ASMR style a new adventure about them. So yeah, I just will turn out some pages more until I will end the video. So listen carefully to the amazing sound of a book. And if you like the sound of the book, I also uploaded a full ASMR episode only with book sounds. So find it yourself in my playlist and enjoy this kind of sound. In a long version.